My parents asked me to be a surrogate for my sister. When I said no, my father curled his lip and said, "You've always been a disappointment. Your only value to this family is your womb." Then my lawyer called, and suddenly, the same family that had spent my entire life dismissing me was on its knees, begging for mercy. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin, I'd love to know where you're joining from. Feel free to share your city in the comments. Now, let me take you back to the beginning. My name is Rachel, and this is the story of how my own family was willing to sacrifice my life to fulfill my sister's dream. None of this started with shouting or dramatic ultimatums. It began quietly in the small, everyday moments of my childhood. For years, I never thought I'd tell this story, but after everything that's happened, I need an outside perspective. It began with a phone call, one that came after 13 years of near silence from my parents. My husband, Walter, immediately felt uneasy. He said something didn't feel right. Neither of us could have imagined how right he was. To understand what followed, you need to know about my sister, Blair. Blair is 4 years older than me, and she has always been the golden child. Even when we were little, it was obvious she was everything my parents had ever wanted. She was smart, athletic, beautiful, effortlessly perfect. They called her their perfect princess, their golden apple, praising her every move. Then there was me. I was the surprise, the unplanned second child. And in my parents' eyes, that alone was a failure. I was born prematurely with a severe heart condition, and my early childhood was spent in and out of hospitals, enduring surgeries and endless treatments. My grandparents, bless them, covered most of the medical bills. Insurance wouldn't. My parents never forgot the cost. They didn't accuse me outright. They didn't have to. Their disappointment came in quiet, cutting remarks that slid under my skin like splinters. "We could have taken that trip to Florida if it weren't for all these medical bills," my mother would sigh, flipping through a magazine. Or my father would mutter, "Blair's college fund would be a lot bigger if we hadn't spent so much on hospital stays." The difference in how we were treated was cruelly obvious. My achievements were met with indifference. Blair's smallest successes were celebrated with parties, gifts, and applause. In high school, I won a statewide writing competition. I was proud, so proud. The awards ceremony was on a Tuesday evening. My parents didn't come. Blair had soccer practice that day. Not a game, just practice. And that was the end of the discussion. But it wasn't only the big moments that hurt. It was the constant, daily reminders of where I stood. Blair knew she was favored, and she used it. She bullied me openly, confident our parents would never take my side. I'll never forget my 12th birthday. I was walking upstairs when I accidentally brushed my elbow against Blair's science project, a lopsided paper match volcano sitting on the landing. It wobbled but didn't fall. Blair saw it from her room. She charged out, her face twisted with fury. "You clumsy idiot," she screamed and shoved me. I lost my footing and tumbled down half a flight of stairs, hitting the bottom hard. The air left my lungs in a painful rush. For weeks, a massive bruise spread across my back, deep purple and sickly green, aching every time I moved. When I tearfully told my mother what had happened, she didn't even look up from her crossword puzzle. "Well, Rachel," she said calmly, "you should be more careful around Blair's things." And in that moment, I understood something very clearly. I didn't matter. That was it. No concern for my pain, no consequences for Blair. Just another clear message that I mattered less than my sister's possessions. School became my only refuge, but even that wasn't easy. My health issues caused me to miss long stretches of class, while Blair brought home perfect grades and shattered records on the soccer field. I struggled just to keep my head above water between hospital visits. The comparisons never stopped. "Why can't you be more like Blair? Blair never has trouble with her homework. Blair doesn't cause us this much worry." By the time I reached my senior year, I had mastered the art of invisibility. I spoke when spoken to. I stayed out of the way. It hurt less that way. The true turning point, the moment light finally broke through the clouds, came when I left for college. I begged my grandparents to help me go as far away as possible. They were the only ones who had ever truly seen the damage my family dynamic caused, and they didn't hesitate. With their help, I enrolled in a university several states away. Leaving home felt like drawing my first full breath after years of suffocation. The first few months were unsettling. I drifted across campus like a ghost, watching other students laugh and form friendships while I hovered on the edges. I ate alone in the cafeteria, unsure how to start conversations. I had spent my entire life being invisible. I didn't know how to exist any other way. I found comfort in the library. Books became my refuge, my quiet sanctuary. And then I met Walter. It happened in a sophomore literature class. He sat beside me, quiet, unassuming. with a calm steadiness that immediately put me at ease. One day, he asked to borrow a pen. We started talking, and he listened, not to compare me to someone else but to understand me. He was patient, kind. When I eventually told him about my heart condition, he didn't recoil or treat me like I was made of glass. He simply accepted it, asking thoughtful questions and listening without judgment. For the first time in my life, I felt truly seen. Our first date was simple, a small diner just off campus. We talked for hours about everything and nothing at all. He told me about his family, a loud, loving group who lived a couple of hours away. He made me laugh, a real laugh, the kind I didn't realize I'd been holding back for years. We got married a year after graduation. It was a small ceremony. I sent invitations to my parents and to Blair. They didn't come. They didn't even send a card. I told myself I expected it, but it still hurt. No matter how old you get, some part of you still hopes your parents will finally show up. Walter's family did. His mother, Diane, welcomed me as if I had always belonged. She took me wedding dress shopping, spending an entire Saturday hopping from store to store. When I found the dress, a simple, elegant one, she cried. Standing behind me in the mirror, her eyes shining, she said softly, "Oh, Rachel, you look so beautiful." That was a moment I had always dreamed of sharing with my own mother. In her own way, Diane gave me that gift. Walter and I built a quiet, happy life. He worked as an engineer, and I took a part-time job at a local bookstore. We bought a small house with a little garden out back. It became our sanctuary, safe, peaceful, and far removed from the neglect of my past. A few years into our marriage, we began talking about starting a family. It wasn't a simple decision, because of my heart condition. Pregnancy had always been considered extremely dangerous. We met with my cardiologist, a kind man who had treated me for years. He didn't sugarcoat the truth. The strain pregnancy would put on my heart could be catastrophic. And in that moment, everything changed again. He didn't forbid it outright, but he strongly advised against it. Walter and I talked for weeks. We explored adoption, surrogacy, every alternative we could think of. Still, there was a deep, aching desire in both of us to try. I wanted to feel that bond, to experience carrying a child of my own. We understood the risks and we chose to face them together. The pregnancy was hell. I was constantly sick. My body struggled under the strain, and after just 3 months, I had to stop working. Hospital visits became routine. Some weeks, I spent more time under fluorescent lights than in my own bed. Around 7 months in, there's a night that still haunts my dreams. I woke up gasping for air, a crushing weight pressing against my chest. Walter rushed me to the emergency room. Machines began screaming. Nurses shouted. Doctors flooded the room. I remember locking eyes with Walter and seeing pure terror before everything blurred. They stabilized me, but I never went home again. I remained hospitalized for the rest of the pregnancy. The delivery was worse. It was chaos, fear, pain. At one point, my heart began to fail. I remember voices shouting orders, the room spinning in and out of focus. I drifted between consciousness and darkness. The last clear thought I had was simple and devastating. I'm not going to survive this. But I did. Barely. Our son, Leo, was born healthy and screaming angry at the world and full of life. When they placed him in my arms, every ounce of fear and pain faded away. He was perfect. He was a miracle. Afterward, there were no comforting half-truths. My cardiologist sat with Walter and me in my hospital room. His expression was grave. Rachel, he said gently, you are incredibly lucky, but your heart cannot endure another pregnancy. If you try again, it will kill you. There was no uncertainty in his voice. It wasn't advice. It was fact. Walter and I accepted it without hesitation. We were content grateful. We had our son, our love, and a peaceful life. That was enough. Contact with my parents and Blair faded into distant, shallow phone calls and the occasional holiday card. The space between us felt healing. I believed. That chapter was finally closed. I was wrong. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. My mother's name flashed on my phone, and my stomach tightened instantly. We hadn't spoken in months. Rachel, she said, unnaturally cheerful. Your father and I need to talk to you. It's important. Could you and Walter come by this weekend? I hesitated. Walter caught my expression immediately and gave a small shake of his head. But that old sense of obligation, the one I had never quite learned to silence one. I said yes. That Saturday, we drove 2 hours to their house. Nothing had changed. The place was spotless, cold. Every surface told the story of Blair's life: graduation photos, soccer trophies, wedding portraits. On a side table sat one small framed photo of me and Walter, tucked almost out of sight. They seated us in the living room, the same room where I had spent years being corrected, dismissed, and ignored. The small talk dragged on, thick with tension. Finally, my mother leaned forward and handed me a thick manila envelope. Her smile was tight, expectant. "We wanted to give this to you in person," she said. I opened it. Inside wasn't a letter or photos. It was legal paperwork. My eyes skimmed the first page, then froze. Surrogacy agreement. The room seemed to tilt. My blood ran cold. It wasn't a request. It was a contract. They wanted me to be a surrogate for Blair. I stared at them, stunned, my mind struggling to process the words. My father began speaking, his tone calm and transactional, as though he were negotiating a contract instead of discussing my life. He explained that Blair and her husband had been dealing with infertility. Multiple rounds of IVF had failed. This, he said, was their last option. They had already spoken to their doctors. They had consulted lawyers. All the paperwork was ready. They weren't asking for my consent. They were presenting me with a completed plan, as if my role had already been agreed upon. I could barely breathe. You know I can't. I finally managed. You know about my heart. I almost died having Leo. The doctors said another pregnancy would kill me. My mother's face folded into tears, but not compassion. They were dramatic, practiced. "Oh, Rachel," she cried, clutching a handkerchief. "How can you be so selfish? Blair has dreamed of being a mother her entire life. This is her only chance. Her heart is broken." Selfish. The word hit harder than anything else they had said. They knew my medical history. They knew I had a young child who needed his mother. They knew they were asking me to risk leaving my son without one. None of it mattered. Blair's desire outweighed my life. My father leaned forward, his voice sharp now. "After everything this family has done for you, you owe us this. You owe your sister. Owe them." The medical bills they loved to weaponize had been paid by my grandparents. The love and support I survived on came from Walter and his family. All my parents had ever given me was the certainty that I would never measure up, that I would always live in Blair's shadow. I stood, shaking. Walter immediately stepped beside me, his arm firm around my shoulders. I couldn't speak. I could only look at the two people who were supposed to protect me, who were calmly asking me to sign away my life for my sister's convenience and feel a vast, hollow emptiness open inside my chest. We walked out. My mother's cries of selfish followed us all the way to the door. I sobbed the entire 2-hour drive home. The days that followed were unbearable. Walter was furious, not just angry, but horrified. "That's it," he said, his voice tight. "We are done. You will never speak to them again. They have made it very clear they don't care whether you live or die." I knew he was right. This wasn't thoughtless or misguided, it was cruel. They were willing to gamble my life and leave my son motherless so Blair could have what she wanted. And yet, decades of conditioning don't disappear overnight. The guilt gnawed at me. Am I selfish? Do I owe them? Is this my chance to finally be enough? I knew those thoughts were poisonous, planted by years of manipulation, but they wouldn't stop circling. I ignored their calls. I didn't answer their texts. Then Blair reached out. At first, her messages were coded in false sweetness. "Hey, sis. I know that was a lot. Just remember, family helps family." A few days later, "I would do this for you in a heartbeat if the roles were reversed." That one nearly made me laugh. This was the same woman who wouldn't drive me to school if it inconvenienced her. When kindness failed, the mask slipped. One night, she sent me an email. I shouldn't have opened it. The subject line read simply, "Wow." The message was short and vicious. "Mom was right about you. You've always only thought about yourself." And that was the moment I realized something important. They weren't just asking for my body. They were demanding my silence, my obedience, and my life. "These people are not rational, Rachel," Walter said. "We need to be prepared." The next day, I made an appointment with a family law attorney. Her name was Ms. Davis, a sharp, no-nonsense woman who didn't waste time on sympathy. When I laid out the entire story from my childhood to the surrogacy demand and the harassment, she listened quietly, her expression growing more and more serious. "What they are doing," she said when I finished, "is a form of reproductive coercion. No court would ever enforce such an agreement, especially with your medical history. But we need to get ahead of this." She advised us to document everything, every call, every text, every attempt at contact. She suggested we send a formal cease and desist letter immediately. That evening, after taking those steps, I felt a calm I hadn't felt in weeks. Walter and I cooked dinner while Leo played on the floor with his blocks. It was a simple, domestic scene, but it felt like a kind of victory. This was my life, my family, and I would do whatever it took to protect it. The guilt was gone. In its place was a cold, hard certainty. I was a mother now, and my first and only duty was to my child, not to the people who had treated me like disposable property. I thought blocking their numbers would finally give us peace. I should have known better. 2 weeks passed in a strange, quiet limbo. Then one afternoon, my phone rang from an unknown number. Every instinct screamed not to answer, but I did. It was my mother. "Rachel," she said. Her voice strained. "We need to talk. Just the two of us. No Walter." A cold dread washed over me, but I agreed to meet her at a local coffee shop. I chose a public place for a reason, and Walter insisted on waiting in the car, just in case. I saw her sitting at a small table by the window. She looked older, more tired than I remembered, but any flicker of sympathy I might have felt vanished the moment I sat down. She didn't greet me. She didn't ask how I was. There was no apology, no acknowledgement of the years of silence or the recent cruelty. She went straight into her rehearsed speech about Blair. "Your sister is devastated, Rachel," she began, stirring her coffee in a way that grated on my nerves. "She's withering away from the grief of not being able to have children." She slid a business card across the table. It was for a high-end fertility specialist in the city. "The doctors say this is her last chance," she said. "This expert says you and Blair are a perfect match for surrogacy." I took a slow breath. "Mom, I told you. My doctors, my cardiologist have forbidden me from getting pregnant again. It's too dangerous." She waved her hand dismissively, as if I were complaining about a minor inconvenience. "Oh, doctors are always overly cautious," she said. "Blair's specialist says the risks are manageable. They can monitor your heart closely." Manageable. The word hung in the air like a knife. She was talking about my life, my heart, as if it were a variable in an equation that could be controlled. Then the conversation took a darker turn. She spoke about family legacy, about bloodlines, and the importance of passing on the family name. And then she said it the words that confirmed what I had always suspected. "Blair deserves to pass on our genes more than you do, Rachel. She's the strong one, the healthy one." She said it so calmly, so matter-of-factly. All those years of feeling like damaged goods, of being the flawed child that wasn't in my head. It was their truth. A strange sense of peace washed over me. It was the peace that comes when your worst fears are finally confirmed. I stood up to leave. Her face twisted into a sneer. "I should have known you'd be difficult about this," she hissed. "You've always been jealous of Blair. This is your chance to finally do something for this family, and you're throwing it away." As I walked out of the coffee shop, leaving her sitting there alone, I didn't feel angry or hurt. I felt free. For the first time, I saw my mother clearly, not as someone who failed to love me enough, but as someone who had never seen me as a person at all. I was just a tool, a means to an end for Blair's benefit. On the drive home, Walter asked how it went. I told him everything. After a long silence, he reached over and took my hand. "You know what?" he said. "They don't deserve you, Rachel. They never have." And I knew he was right. The cease and desist letter seemed to ignite something in them. My father, unable to reach me directly, began sending threatening messages from burner phones. "You have broken your mother's heart," one text read. "There will be consequences for your actions." And suddenly, the storm that had been building for years was finally here. "We will not let you destroy this family." Each message grew more menacing than the last. Then came the call from my grandmother. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "Rachel," she said, "I overheard your parents talking to an attorney. They're looking for legal ways to force you to do this." She told me they were discussing family obligation laws and medical rights. Their plan was to argue that my doctors were being overly cautious, that my refusal wasn't based on legitimate medical concerns, but on unresolved resentment toward Blair. They were literally planning to sue their own daughter, to force her into a life-threatening medical procedure. The audacity of it was breathtaking. And then my grandmother dropped another bombshell. Blair's husband was completely against the plan. He thought it was insane to risk someone's life. But Blair and my parents had steamrolled him, cutting him out of the conversation. At least there was one sane person in that family. This new threat pushed us into high gear. I immediately contacted my doctor's office and asked them to add extra security protocols to my medical records. We hired Ms. Davis to represent us officially. She was furious on my behalf. "They cannot legally compel you to be a surrogate," she assured me. "That's reproductive coercion, and no court would uphold it. But we need to be aggressive." Just as we were preparing our defense, the next wave of attack began. My parents launched a smear campaign within the extended family. They called the large family gathering one we weren't invited to. Soon after, relatives began calling us. My aunt from Texas called, sobbing, telling me she'd had to watch Blair suffer through yet another failed IVF cycle. My parents had twisted the story completely. They were telling everyone my heart condition had significantly improved and that I was using it. as an excuse because I was jealous of Blair's success. My mother's sister started posting cryptic messages on Facebook about selfish family members and the importance of sacrifice. Everyone knew who she meant. I felt like I was being buried alive under their lies. The pressure was immense. But then, two small lights appeared in the darkness. First, my cousin Paige, who had grown up seeing how my parents treated me, messaged me privately. "Rachel," she wrote, "I know what they're doing. I remember how they treated you as a kid. They're being insane. Don't you dare let them guilt you into this." Her message was like a lifeline. The second came as a secret phone call. Late one night, Blair's husband, Mark, called Walter. His voice was frantic, desperate. He confirmed everything my grandmother had said. He told Walter he'd been trying to reason with them, but they were so obsessed with their plan they wouldn't listen to anyone. He was worried they were heading towards serious legal trouble. That was it. I was done being the quiet victim. I was done letting them control the narrative. That night, Walter and I sat down and wrote a mass email to our entire extended family. There was no drama, no accusations, only the facts. We summarized my heart condition, included a direct quote from my cardiologist about the mortal risks of another pregnancy, and attached a scanned copy of the specialist's official recommendation. I ended the message with a clear boundary. I would no longer discuss surrogacy, and any further harassment would be handled by my lawyer. Then I hit send. It was my truth bomb. After that, I took the final step. With Walter's help, I blocked every family member except my grandparents and my cousin Paige. We created new private social media profiles under different names, for close friends only. It felt drastic, like entering witness protection, but it was also incredibly freeing. The constant buzz of anxiety from my phone vanished. There was only silence. The reaction was predictable. A few relatives sent apologetic messages to Paige, admitting they hadn't known the full medical reality. Most, however, went silent, either too embarrassed to admit they'd been duped or too loyal to my parents to go against them. My mother's final message reached me through my grandmother. My grandma read it to me over the phone, her voice heavy with sadness. "You have let this family down for the last time." My mother had written, "You put your own selfish needs ahead of your sister's happiness. Do not expect to be welcomed back." I expected to feel pain as I listened to those words. Instead, I felt relief. It confirmed what I'd always known. My only value to them had been what I could give Blair. Now that I was useless, I was discarded. The door had finally closed. Life settled into a new, peaceful rhythm. I slept better than I had in years. Walter said he saw a change in me. I laughed more freely, smiled more easily. In this new, drama-free environment, our son Leo was thriving. We started a Sunday tradition of board game nights. One evening, watching Leo squeal with laughter as he beat Walter at Candyland, I realized something. This is what family is supposed to feel like: safe, loving, unconditional. My grandmother visited sometimes, always making sure my parents didn't know. On one visit, she brought a box of old photos. She kept pictures of me as a baby I'd never seen, seeing myself as a happy little girl. Unaware of the years ahead, I felt a surge of protectiveness for her. I was finally giving her the love and safety she'd always deserved. About a month after I sent the mass email, just when I thought the story had reached its quiet, sad conclusion, everything exploded. Truth has a way of coming out, and it did in the most spectacular way imaginable. It started with a call to my lawyer, Ms. Davis. The call came from the legal department of Blair's fertility clinic. They had been conducting an internal review after my parents raised concerns about the clinic's unwillingness to cooperate. As part of that review, the clinic requested my official medical records from my cardiologist. What they received was, of course, a stark contrast to the documents my parents had submitted. The clinic's legal team informed Ms. Davis that my parents and Blair had submitted forged medical records documents that deliberately omitted my severe heart condition and the life-threatening complications of my previous pregnancy. They had committed medical fraud. The clinic was already preparing a formal report. I was stunned. I knew my parents were manipulative, but I never imagined they would stoop to an actual crime. But that was only the first domino to fall. The second came just hours later, and it brought the whole rotten structure crashing down. Blair's husband, Mark, had finally had enough. He entered the extended family group chat, the one I was no longer part of, and detonated a truth bomb. Paige sent me screenshots. His message was long and detailed. He revealed how my parents and Blair had conspired to hide my medical condition from the doctors. He disclosed that Blair had been fully aware of my near-death experience during pregnancy, but had downplayed it to everyone, including him. He wrote that he could no longer stay married to someone who would commit fraud and knowingly endanger her own sister's life for her own desires. The response was immediate. The aunts and cousins who had been posting cryptic, judgmental messages went silent. My aunt from Texas, the one who had cried to me, called again, but this time with apologies. She said she had no idea about the fraud. She had been manipulated. A number of family members cut off contact with my parents and Blair, calling their behavior monstrous and illegal. It was a complete reversal. The perfect facade they had built over decades shattered in a single afternoon, brought down by their own deceit. If you're still listening to this, thank you. If you've been with me through this story, please like this video and comment with the number 1 below. It lets me know you're here and that you're standing with me through all of this. Your support means the world. Please comment with the number 1. And then the fallout hit. It was swift, brutal, public. The family portrait my parents had carefully curated was ripped to shreds. Mark filed for divorce from Blair the following week. In his filings, he cited the medical fraud and the conspiracy against me as primary reasons. The news spread like wildfire. The golden child, the perfect princess. Suddenly she was at the center of a scandalous, very public divorce. The legal repercussions began to mount quickly. According to my lawyer, my parents and Blair were facing serious consequences for the medical fraud. The fertility clinic, to protect its reputation, banned them from all associated facilities for life. They were also under investigation by the State Medical Board. I never wanted revenge. I only wanted to be left alone. But watching their perfect world crumble under the weight of their own actions felt like a kind of poetic justice. The social shunning was perhaps even more devastating. My parents, who had built their identity around appearances, became pariahs. Old family friends stopped calling. They were uninvited from neighborhood gatherings. The family they had manipulated into turning against me had now turned on them. The flying monkeys had flown back to a new roost, one where my parents were the villains. I watched it all from a safe distance, getting updates from Paige and my grandmother. It was surreal. These were the people who had controlled my life through guilt and shame, people who had once seemed untouchable. Now they were powerless. They had spent their lives trying to control everyone around them. In the end, their obsession with control led to their own self-destructs. They did this to themselves. Meanwhile, I was living my best life surrounded by people who genuinely valued me, far away from the wreckage they had created. Today, my life is quiet, and it is beautiful. The constant knot of anxiety that once lived in my stomach is gone. I wake up in the morning, and the first feeling is peace, not dread. Walter and I are stronger than ever. Leo is a happy, thriving 7-year-old who knows nothing of the drama, only that he is loved fiercely by his parents. My relationship with my grandparents and Paige is closer than ever. They are my family. Along with Walter's incredible family, they have shown me what true, unconditional love looks like. It isn't about what you can do for someone. It's about loving them for who they are. Sometimes I think about Blair and my parents. I don't feel anger anymore, just a sad kind of pity. They had a daughter who, despite everything, would have loved them if they had only let her. But they couldn't see past their own ambition and obsession with perfection. I heard through my grandmother that Blair never remarried, and my parents have become reclusive and bitter. Their perfect story ended in a very ugly way. To anyone out there watching this, anyone who has ever been made to feel like you're not enough, like your needs don't matter, like you're the problem in a toxic family, please hear me. It is not selfish to protect yourself. It is not selfish to draw a line in the sand and say, asterisk, asterisk, no more. Asterisk, asterisk, your health, mental and physical matters. Your life has value. Walking away from people who don't love you enough to respect your life may be the bravest, most loving thing you ever do for yourself. You are not obligated to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. Thank you. Thank you for listening to my story. Your support, your comments, your simple act of being here, it has meant more than you can ever know. It showed me I'm not alone. And I hope, in some small way, my story can do the same for you.